So welcome everyone to CW Live. I'm Natasha Nicholson, Executive Editor of IABC's magazine Communication World, and today I'll be talking with Shel Holtz, IABC Fellow, and he's a Principal of Holtz Communication and Technology and author of Tech Column in Communication World magazine. Shel will be presenting at the IABC World Conference about the phenomenon of content shock and how companies can overcome it. Welcome, Shel.
Hi, Natasha. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, my pleasure.
So, what is content shock?
For millennia, people have been concerned about volume of content being overwhelming to people. I mean, Aristotle talked about it with the idea of just books and learning. It's something that came up quite a bit with the invention of the printing press, that all of this content would just flood people's brains and turn them into jelly. We heard it with the introduction of newspapers. We heard it with the development of public education. All of this content was just going to be too much for people to handle. Their heads would explode. About 4 or 5 years ago, Steve Rubel, currently with Edelman, worried that there was something coming called attention crash. There's just too much content online for people to pay attention to, and it would just render them helpless, and they'd rebel by rejecting all of this content online. But this whole idea of content crash, of content shock, was posited a few months back by Mark Schaefer, who's a very well-known and highly regarded marketing expert, and very smart, and a heck of a nice guy, too. I just disagree with him on this. What he said was that we are coming to this point where the ability for people to pay attention to all of the content that's out there is going to cross the line with the volume of content that's being produced. He says this abundance is actually a good thing for consumers, but a bad thing for companies that are using content as a method for marketing. He said that it's just not going to be economical for any organization except those with the deepest pockets to produce content and get the kinds of return based on what it costs to produce the content, to get the kinds of return that will make it worth their while to make that kind of investment. And content marketing, therefore, is just not going to be something that most organizations are going to find to be economical.
So if consumers are overwhelmed by the amount of content available from companies, what's your thinking on that? How can companies address this? Should they stop producing content?
No, not by any stretch of the imagination. I disagree with the notion of content shock to begin with. I don't think there is a mystical line. I think, and Mark makes the point that he's not talking about too much for consumers. It's just that our ability for our content to bubble up and be seen by consumers when we're competing against this great volume, there's just too much, and we're not going to be able to compete. I think that's wrong. I think we can compete and have our content be found just fine, and there are a number of different approaches to take to this. But at the top of the list, I said this in a blog post recently. I invented a word. I said niches are getting nichier. And to be able to target your content to an audience so that they will find it, they will talk about it, they will share it with other people who have that specific interest is a skill that we need to be able to develop as communicators. I think we've grown up in an era of mass media where you produce something and you blast it out there. Think about a press release, for example, which employs pretty much a spray and pray approach. We're going to blast it out to as many publications as possible. We're going to get it published by as many of those outlets as possible. The maximum number of eyeballs will see it, and we can claim that we got X number of impressions. It's a spray and pray approach. These days, we're seeing some organizations developing content with an audience in mind of just one person. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. NatWest is a financial institution in the UK, and they've created a series of Vine videos that answer the most common questions that come into their customer service center. These are things like, how do I turn this off on my account, or how to types of questions. So they've created these 6-second videos, and when somebody tweets in, how do I do this, they'll tweet back with a link to one of these videos. They were never created with the intention that they're going to sit on Vine and attract a lot of attention. But when somebody asks, we've now got this great piece of content we can share with you that actually makes it fun to get the answer to the question. Another example is Warby Parker, a company that is sort of challenging the mainstream eyeglass manufacturing industry. And what they're doing is when somebody writes in with a question like, which of these two brands of frames that you sell is better manufactured, something like that, they'll record a YouTube video in response, post it to YouTube, and then send the link out to the person who asked the question as a response email. So, these are not sophisticated videos. They're not great productions. This is just an employee sitting at his desk answering a question to what might just well be a video camera on a cell phone. But you go look at these on YouTube, and they've got 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 views, a video that was created and intended for one person. That's because somebody sees it and says, yeah, you got to see this answer I got from Warby Parker, and shares it, and it spreads. So, there are just we're just scratching the surface here on the techniques that are available to us to reach an audience with good content, despite the fact that we're competing against so much other content. And by the way, I dispute the idea that the audience is overwhelmed by all of this. There are major publishers that are now tapping into content exchanges that allow them to publish each other's content. And the reason this is so desirable to these media outlets is because their audiences are thirsting for more content than these outlets are able to deliver with their own original reporting. So they're now looking for other sources of content to satisfy that demand. We have opportunities to become part of that mix that satisfies this insatiable thirst that people have for more and more content.
So you've talked about something called micro niches, and maybe you could explain that a bit more, and what are some ways that people can identify these segments?
The micro niches, I mean, within your own industry, people should be able to identify those folks based on anything from specific interests of people who would be interested in or already use the products and services of an organization, to where people are along the customer journey. Are they considering a particular supplier of product? Are they at the point where they're looking to make a decision to buy? That sort of thing. So as these niches get more and more defined, it's important to be able to tap into them. There was a book I read called The Anatomy of Buzz Revisited by Emmanuel Rosen. And he tells the story of the marketing effort for the book Cold Mountain. You remember that one? Civil War story. Was made into a terrible movie. It was a book when it was first published that had a number of strikes against it. It was a first-time author that nobody had ever heard of. It wasn't a potboiler or summer beach reading. It was literature. It was being published by an independent publisher, and it dealt with the Civil War, which was not a real barn burner type of a subject for fiction. And the way they dealt with this was to start to build buzz in small communities. Civil War bus they went to, and generated some buzz there. They went to people who loved literature and generated buzz there. There are people who were into books from independent publishers, so they started to generate some buzz there. And of course this turned into an international bestseller because of this effort to generate interest, to build interest within these niche communities, rather than just going out to book readers and saying, here's another Civil War novel. So that's one approach to looking at niches that you would want to accommodate with your content.
So I think we can agree there's a lot of content out there.
Oh, there is.
Yeah. So what can communication professionals do to make their content stand out? What can they do to make a difference? What should they watch out for?
Well, the first thing you have to do is make it interesting, make it entertaining. If you can answer questions that customers have, that consumers have, when people type in questions, your answer, if it's a good one and it's reasonably entertaining and well done, that's going to show up. You want to make sure that you are accommodating the interest of the audience. I think far too much of the content that organizations create is designed to support an agenda for the business, not to support what the customer is necessarily interested in. You want to use a variety of media and look at the media that people are really sort of glomming onto these days. You want to take advantage of new channels. I was intrigued. There's a new app, well, relatively new at this point, called Jelly. I don't know, Natasha, if you've heard of Jelly.
No.
But it's from, I think, Biz Stone, one of the co-founders of Twitter, is behind this. And it's an app on the iPhone and Android where you can ask a question. You take a picture of something, and then you can make little circles and arrows and marks on the photo, right, using your phone. And then you sort of key in your question, and it goes out to your social graph, so the people you're networked with and the people they're networked with. And you can thumb through the questions that people have asked. And I downloaded the app within days of its release out of curiosity, to see if there was potential there for communicators and marketers. And one of the first questions I saw was from GE, General Electric. And what they said was, we're just playing with it to see if there's anything here for us. But they were asking questions that are very consistent with a theme that has become very common in GE's communication, which has to do with the STEM topics, science, technology, engineering, and math. They're really pushing people to get interested in this at young ages so that there's a good pipeline of scientists and engineers that GE can hire 15, 20, 25 years down the line. So this is the type of question they were posing. I think tapping into these new tools and experimenting and going where people are migrating to. I mean, were you on top of Instagram as people were shifting from Twitter to Instagram as a means of sharing content? So, knowing what the new trends are and the hot new properties. These are just some of the approaches that you can take to make sure you're doing content that will resonate with people.
Well, Shel, I know you're going to have a lot more to share at the World Conference. I'm very much looking forward to hearing your session there.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to delivering it. Have a lot of great examples, too.
Great. And I'm looking forward to hearing your session, and I want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode of CW Live. Look forward to seeing you soon.
My pleasure, Natasha. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.